The laughter didn't fade, it snapped, sharp as breaking glass, cutting straight through the warm studio air and leaving a silence that tasted metallic. The red recording light above camera 2 flickered twice, like it knew something the audience didn't, and Jonathan Ross leaned forward with a grin that no longer matched the energy in the room. Moments earlier, the set buzzed with easy charm, Brosnan's effortless poise, Ross's quick wit, the crowd's eager applause, but now everything felt off-tempo, like the show had slipped out of rhythm. A mug rattled against the desk, the faint ceramic tap echoing in a space suddenly too quiet. The audience shifted uneasily, unsure whether to laugh or brace for impact. Pierce Brosnan didn't smile back. Instead, his expression tightened in a way only the front row could notice, a tiny shift, a subtle tension, the kind of change that warns you something unscripted is about to unfold. Ross's next question hovered for a beat, hanging in the air with a weight that didn't belong on a talk show couch. And when he finally asked it, the atmosphere cracked open. Brosnan's eyes cooled instantly, the warmth draining from his face like someone had turned down the sun. One woman in the audience exhaled sharply, a small involuntary sound that somehow echoed. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the kind of moment where the entire room feels suspended, caught between what just happened and the disaster about to follow. And that's when the tension shifted from awkward to dangerous. The cameras kept rolling. The lights kept burning, but every smile in the room had disappeared. Because this wasn't banter anymore. This wasn't television. This was a line crossed and everyone knew it, before that fault line opened on stage. Everything had carried the soft illusion of control, the kind Jonathan Ross perfected over years of guiding guests through humor, nostalgia, and just enough mischief to keep the audience leaning forward. He wasn't merely a host. He was a conductor draped in velvet confidence, shaping laughter with his cadence and steering conversations, like a man who could read the room before anyone else even stepped inside it. Pierce Brosnan entered the set with the easy elegance of someone who had lived through fame, fire, and reinvention without ever letting the world see him tremble. His walk was measured, shoulders relaxed, the faint smile of a man who knew he would charm the audience just by breathing. Even the cameras seemed to settle when he sat down, framing him with that signature calm, almost as if the studio lights softened out of respect. The crowd adored him immediately, an energy warm enough to coat the room. Ross teased him lightly about Bond, about old stunts, about the kind of stories everyone expects from someone who once carried an entire franchise on his back. And Brosnan played along, gracious, witty, perfectly paced. It was the kind of chemistry producers dream about, effortless, nostalgic, safe. But beneath Ross's polished banter there was a shift. A subtle tightening in his questions. A small spark in his eyes that seasoned viewers might have recognized as curiosity turning into temptation. He had a card, figuratively, maybe literally, that he wasn't showing yet. A topic he was circling, slow and deliberate, the way a hunter circles a moment. And though the room still felt warm, still sounded friendly, a faint tension pulsed beneath the laughter. The kind no one notices. Until it's too late, Ross shifted in his seat with a slow, deliberate ease. The kind that didn't look suspicious to the casual viewer but sent a quiet signal to anyone who understood the choreography of talk show tension. His fingers tapped once against his cue card, soft, rhythmic, calculated, as if warming up a question he knew he shouldn't ask but couldn't resist. Pierce Brosnan's smile, still polite, flickered at the edges, the tiniest tremor in an otherwise composed facade. The room hadn't caught it yet, but the camera certainly had. Ross leaned in with a voice that dropped half an octave, not dramatic, but coaxing, dangerously coaxing. He brought up a film, a feud, a moment from Brosnan's past that hadn't been revisited in years, wrapped in a light-hearted tone that failed to disguise the sting underneath it. Pierced eyebrows lifted not in amusement, but in recognition. He gave a short answer, crisp, closed, a boundary drawn in velvet. Ross nodded, but didn't stop. He pushed again, this time with a follow-up angle just slightly sharper, a comment disguised as a joke but sharpened like a blade. The audience gave a few awkward laughs, the polite kind. The conditioned kind then fell silent when Brosnan didn't return the humor. The shift was subtle but seismic. Brosnan's shoulders squared. His voice dropped into that unmistakable calm some people mistake for politeness, but insiders know it means, "That's enough." Ross felt the change, but, sensing the spark of controversy, tapped it one more time. A question too personal. A wound too real. A moment too private to drag under studio lights. Brosnan inhaled slow, controlled. His smile faded completely, replaced by something colder, steadier. And when he finally spoke, the room froze with him. "Jonathan," he said quietly, "you're stepping somewhere you shouldn't." And that was the moment the show stopped being an interview and became a countdown. Ross blinked, surprised not by the words but by the tone. Quiet, steady, the kind that doesn't rise because it doesn't need to. The audience sensed the shift instantly. Their posture changed, their breaths shortened, as if the entire room leaned in to see which direction the moment would fall. Ross forced a chuckle, the kind that comes out too light, too thin. "Come on, Pierce," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "We're just having a bit of fun." But Brosnan didn't soften. His eyes held that stillness that precedes a storm, a calm so focused it made the bright stage lights feel suddenly colder. "Fun," Pierce echoed, his voice low, "isn't the same as provocation." A few people in the crowd gasped tiny, involuntary sounds of discomfort. Ross shifted again, this time with a defensive edge, leaning back as if distance could protect him from the gravity building between them. "It's television," he insisted, a thin smile pasted across his face. "People want honesty." Brosnan leaned forward, and for the first time all night his charm vanished entirely. "Honesty," he said, "isn't an excuse to dig in wounds you don't understand." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it vibrated, thick with the kind of tension no laugh track could fix. Ross, feeling control slipping through his fingers, attempted one final jab masked as humor. "You're a tough guy, Pierce. Surely you can handle a question." Brosnan stood. Not abruptly, not theatrically. He rose with the slow deliberation of someone reclaiming control, pushing his chair back with a scrape that echoed like a warning across the studio floor. Ross tried to cover it. "Pierce, don't be dramatic," but the words fell flat. Brosnan's jaw tightened. "Respect isn't drama," he replied. And with that, he turned away from the desk, from the lights, from the forced laughter dying behind him. The interview had shattered, and the room knew it would never return to what it was minutes before. The moment Pierce Brosnan disappeared behind the curtain, the studio felt like it had been drained of oxygen. The door didn't slam, it simply clicked shut, soft and final, but somehow the quiet sound rippled louder than any applause the show had heard all night. Ross sat frozen for half a second, hands awkwardly suspended above his desk as if he still expected Brosnan to return, laugh, and reveal it was all a bit. But the audience already knew. Nothing about what had just happened was scripted. A stage manager rushed toward Ross, whispering fiercely behind a hand half cupped over his mouth, eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes when a show goes off the rails. Ross nodded stiffly, attempted to joke something about actors being too sensitive, but the laughter it received wasn't laughter at all. It was the brittle sound people make when they desperately want normalcy to return, even though normal has already slipped away. Behind the scenes, Brosnan's team swarmed him in the hallway, voices low but urgent, trying to ease the tension, offering ways to patch the moment before it spiraled into headlines. But Brosnan wasn't angry in the explosive sense. He was composed, centered, the kind of calm that makes people around him even more nervous. "I won't be disrespected on camera," he murmured, each word measured like he was choosing them with surgical precision. Meanwhile, the control room erupted in frantic debates, cut the segment, salvage the second half, spin it into humor. A producer argued they couldn't hide it. Too many audience phones had already been recording. Another insisted the PR fallout could be contained if Ross apologized on air. Confusion, whispers, frantic pacing, everything collided in a frantic blur. But one truth hung over them all: the damage had already been done, and the world was going to see it. It didn't take hours. It didn't even take minutes. By the time Ross awkwardly wrapped the show and the credits rolled, the moment had already leaked into the bloodstream of the internet. Clips from shaky audience phones hit social platforms like sparks landing on dry grass. Each angle, each whisper, each second of Brosnan rising from his seat uploaded, shared, dissected. Within half an hour, the first headlines flashed across entertainment feeds. Pierce Brosnan walks out, full clip inside. Jonathan Ross pushes too far? Televised meltdown or justified reaction? Comment sections erupted with the intensity of a courtroom trial. Some viewers accused Ross of crossing lines for ratings, dragging private pain into public spectacle. Others argued that Brosnan overreacted, calling him fragile or overly sensitive, as if sensitivity were a sin. Talk show critics broke down the footage frame by frame, pausing at Brosnan's tightened jaw or Ross's searching smirk, interpreting every micro-expression like forensic analysts reading a crime scene. Even other celebrities chimed in, some subtly siding with Brosnan through cryptic posts about boundaries, others praising Ross for fearless interviewing. Meanwhile, the network scrambled behind closed doors, drafting statements, revising them, then tearing them apart again. Publicists calculated the cost of silence versus the cost of speaking. Producers debated whether airing the unedited segment would be transparency or gasoline. And through all of it, neither Brosnan nor Ross said a word. Brosnan stayed silent, choosing dignity over drama. Ross retreated from social media, his usual humor replaced by a rare, uneasy quiet. The internet kept spinning theories, amplifying them, turning a singular moment into a national spectacle. And yet, beneath all the noise, one haunting question kept resurfacing, echoing louder with each replay. What exactly happened after the cameras stopped? When the noise finally began to settle, the two men emerged not with fire, but with silence measured, intentional, the kind that carries more weight than any public argument could. Days later, a brief statement appeared from Brosnan's team. Only a few lines long, polished enough for press yet honest enough to feel unmistakably his. "Respect is a conversation," it read. And on that night, mine was interrupted. Ross responded with a line of his own, equally restrained. "Boundaries matter, even in entertainment. No accusations, no justifications. Just two acknowledgments existing in separate spaces, like parallel truths orbiting the same moment." Fans continued to debate the incident, carving themselves into factions, defending their chosen version of the story. Analysts tried to stitch the narrative together from cut clips and camera angles, but none of them truly captured what lived between the words spoken on air. And maybe that's the point. Not every rupture needs a villain. Not every clash needs a winner. Sometimes a moment becomes larger simply because it exposes how fragile the line between performance and humanity really is. As the world moved on, one question lingered quietly in the echo. In a seat under those lights, what would you have done?